Speaking of bones to chew on, Brian, should we talk now at the top of the program about somebody who might not be having a holly jolly Christmas? Who might be, I don't know, getting ready to look good in stripes instead of a Santa Claus outfit? The folks have not heard an update on Kast Media and our favorite weasel, Colin Thomson, in some time because, well, I believe we did the 14-part series, so they had a pretty good background and in-depth dive on what was going on. But for the new listeners out there, the reprobate, thief, con man, liar, shyster, con artist, and all-around criminal, but not a mastermind.
Allegedly.
It will soon be alleged in writing. The person that was behind the Kast Media debacle that not only defrauded our operation here, me and Brian, of 6 figures in money, but others up to 7 figures, and celebrities including Theo Von and Sarah Silverman and a whole cast of those people, Penn Jillette. And at least he had the razor blade business to fall back on. But nevertheless, we haven't done an update in a while because certain things have been going on. There's been some investigating and some certain things going on that we could not comment on publicly for fear that weasel might be out there somewhere listening to us and we'd tell him some of the things that we know. That's one of the reasons. But we thought we would end the year. First of all, Brian, I've got to ask you as the Wall Street guru. Of course, the longtime listeners and the folks who heard the segments before know that Colin tried to strong-arm everybody he owed money to into entering into an agreement with PodcastOne that was going to take everybody's show to levels they'd never dreamed of.
And if they didn't do it, he would go bankrupt.
And if they didn't do it, he'd go bankrupt. And it was the only way you were going to get your money. How were we going to go to levels we've never dreamed of when we're already number one? Would we loop everybody else again like a fucking jammer in roller derby and come back around? But nevertheless, he tried to strong-arm everybody, even though his tactics may be strong-armed, but his demeanor was limp-wristed about it. And as a result, well, PodcastOne went public after we had revealed everything that we revealed about Colin and about Kast and about the guy behind PodcastOne, the guy from LiveOne, Rob Ellen, and the machinations that they were going through to try to pump up this apparently going to be allegedly bonus stock. And in the initial public offering of said stock, they went from the penthouse to the outhouse in about 24 hours. And Brian, so my question to you is, have they got out of that outhouse yet? Or are they stuck in a 2-story outhouse on the first floor?
We were told that the only way we would come close to being whole, still without any actual accounting, would be to accept a deal with PodcastOne where a portion of it would be paid in stock. PodcastOne, to other parties we believe, were saying that the stock would be valued at $8 to $12. They went public with that as well. The stock today, the stock that we refused, by the way, if anyone hasn't been able to tell, we're having the best time we've ever had with the show right now. And we're doing fine. PodcastOne stock as we are recording, $1.68.
And it debuted at $8 that sunny morning that it went public.
No, it didn't debut at $8. They wanted it to be $8, and as soon as it opened, the market decided, you know what, $5.80 sounds more appropriate.
That's right. They had said $8. It started at $5.80, and it's now
$1.68 with a market cap of $39.2 million. So if you have $40 million, you could buy all of PodcastOne and and figure out how it's worth that much even right now.
Well, it's worth that much because Rob and his now apparently not close friend, Colin, got together and said, hey, we'll print up a bunch of certificates of stock in this fictitious company that we're going to fucking strong arm people into working for, and we're going to say that it's valued at tens of millions of dollars and get people to buy pieces of it. And then we're all going to move to Calabasas.
And for the record, PodcastOne, 80% of it is owned by LiveOne, the parent company.
Yeah,
Rob Ellen's company.
Well, here's another. This is Rob Ellen is the CEO that tried to strong arm me via email with a veiled threat that I believe I ended my last communication with him was, so you go fuck yourself. But nevertheless, this guy, CEO of a multi-million dollar company, what's that stock worth? The parent company?
The parent company of the $1.68 PodcastOne, 80% is owned by LiveOne, which is at $1.05.
And I just hate it that Rob and Colin the Weasel are having a miserable Christmas, while, Brian, as you mentioned, not only of our because now we are in complete control of not only our podcast and our intellectual property and our trademarks and our feed and our YouTube channel, and also our advertising agency who works directly for us. We own everything and control everything, and we get the numbers on everything. So thank you, Colin. And our new advertising agency is already doing a better job than you ever did. So thank you, Colin. And we got a better deal. So thank you, Colin. And we got all of our sponsors back because they heard where you took their money that was supposed to come to us and shoved it in Calabasas. And so we got all of them back. And now the podcast is doing better than ever. And we're having a holly jolly Christmas, and you miserable piece of shit, are hiding under a rock out there on the coast somewhere, not knowing whether to wind your ass or scratch your watch, and you don't know what we know, and you don't know when we're going to tell you. And Stephen P. New is aching to take a trip to California, and he's got a new co-counsel named Andre the Giant, who's going to put the big giant splash down. So I just wanted to say hello.
There may be some trademark issues with that, but we'll work on it for the future.
I just wanted to say hello to Colin and his ilk. Rob, nobody's hearing from Colin these days, and even the PodcastOne press releases don't mention any involvement with Colin Thomson or Kast Media anymore, do they?
No, it's very interesting, and everyone needs to remember his name, Colin Thomson. If he still has the ridiculous hairdo, he had ridiculous frosted tips. If you see this clown, that's him. This guy, who owes us a lot of money, again, we're doing great, but that doesn't change the fact that he took our money. We never got it back. We never got the accounting. He kept billing. So there's a few $100,000 that need to come back home. But we'll get there. That doesn't change the fact that we're doing great now. We can celebrate where we are today here at the end of 2023. I don't know if Colin could do that. You know, he said the quiet part out loud. There was an interview a few months ago. Forget which publication had it. And he didn't want to say the names of his shows, because he was afraid that people would get in touch with the advertisers, or that people would leave comments on Apple Podcasts or reviews, because he's still in business. The threat of take this deal or I will go bankrupt. We didn't take the deal. Other people didn't take the deal. Kast Media is still in operation. They're still billing. They're still pulling in money every month.
Now, when you say they, since we know that almost every single employee either quit or is actively suing him in some kind of class action situation, it's basically just him. He's still sending people bills for things that he's apparently collecting money for.
That's right. So Colin's still in operation under the name Kast Media, but his name seems to be missing. You know, a press release went out November 15th. PodcastOne acquires exclusive rights to Lost in Panama podcast, including IP for TV and film. Now, this show, I believe, like The Opportunist, that's another one of the shows that Colin still owns, were Colin's intellectual property. They were developed by Kast Media. They were his shows. When all the other shows said, fuck you, you're a thief, I'm out of here, he's still in operation because of these shows he was still able to bill for. To complete that sentence, to bill for.
Yes.
So now all of a sudden this press release comes out. PodcastOne has acquired Season 1, the previous episode, which was downloaded 2 million times, and future episodes, as well as the TV rights. A documentary series is in development. 19 new shows added this year. You go through this press release here, not a mention of Kast Media. Not a mention of Colin Thomson. That's a little odd. They're acquiring this show. Who are they acquiring it from? How come all of a sudden PodcastOne doesn't have Colin Thomson or Kast Media? I'm looking through this anywhere in this thing. It's returning in May of 2024. But who'd they buy it from? How much stock did he get for it? And how's that stock doing? So that's the point. We said they were going to try to wait everything out, get Colin back into the game. Weasels like weasels. Rob Ellen has shown himself to be someone with no integrity whatsoever. So Colin's right up there with the kind of people he would want to work with. Colin may not like the way things worked out because he's an idiot. He played his hand wrong and he's an idiot. The only thing he had going for him was his advertising. He's a podcast moron. But again, there's a lot of things in play. Don't forget his name. He may not want you to know what are his shows. Go look at what his shows are. Let those shows know what you think of the fact that they make money for the person who stole money from a bunch of shows, including Jim Cornette and Brian Last. And he's still in operation, folks.
And from innocent parents of special needs children. Because I don't know how much, there's a limit to how much sympathy you can probably drum up for you and me, because they know we'll make it.
And look, PodcastOne can make deals with some of the desperate shows that were cash shows that are just shit out of luck. These are shows that are never going to really get popular, never going to really make real money. And PodcastOne is promising the world with programmatic ads. If you listen to a show that's a PodcastOne show and you're like, man, there's a lot of fucking ads in the middle of this show, that's their business model. Overload the shows with programmatic ads. It's a model that we reject, by the way.
Ours are done in good taste and with decent professional lighting.
So this is going to be the last thing we say for a little while. We have to go radio silent for a variety of reasons, but as soon as there is an update we can give, we will give. But the point here at the end of the year, we kind of end this year the way we ended last year. Where's our money, Colin? But we're in a better position today than we were a year ago. And in life, you can't let creeps like this intimidate you, lie to you, steal from you, cheat you, and think they could bounce off and just go hang out in West Hollywood. No. So, more to come. And in the meantime, Colin, maybe you're going to hear from Sergeant McCoy. I don't know. Maybe you're going to hear from Andre the Giant. I don't know. Or maybe you'll hear from this man. Wings! You don't know what's coming, but it's coming. And by the way, if you hear this, this has all been approved by our lawyer, the esteemed Stephen P. New. Happy birthday, Stephen P. New. We love you.
Happy birthday, the consigliere himself, who, as I said, is looking forward to a nice West Coast tan. But and by the way, you mentioned the weaselness of Colin Thomson. And I mentioned the weaselness of him and his cohorts. But again, they have created a situation where I know for you it would be nothing to give good stock advice. You follow the game on Wall Street there. But they created a situation where Jim Cornette looked like Edgar Casey prognosticating the stock market. I was actually able to say, they're going to try to sell you this shit, and it's going to fucking fall apart. And I was correct. So that tells you how stupid the people that actually bought that stock, the few that did, must have been.
And by the way, for Q2 for 2024, the fiscal year of 2024, PodcastOne reporting $10.5 million in revenue with $1.4 million in losses. So they can't make money on the millions they're making. And just wait until they have to repay those loans.
Should Tony Khan buy PodcastOne?
Ooh, how do we take that if he does that? Is that an attack on us? How do you see that?
I see that as the only other person that might buy something that loses that much money and run it just for the fucking fun of it.
If he bought it for $40 million, who does he put in charge?
Well, I think probably RJ City and referee Aubrey Ed.
You know, you're joking, but that may actually be who he puts in charge. Well, you heard it here first. Tony Khan allegedly in talks to buy PodcastOne.
Yes, allegedly. Allegedly, well, just so he could all of his wrestling action figures could have their own podcast.
If Tony Khan lets it come out that he's going to buy PodcastOne, does Nick Khan go and set up a meeting with Rob Ellen?
No, I don't think that. It appears to me that if you actually met Rob Ellen, at least the way that he writes English in his emails, you would think that he was the guy that fucking invented huffing goddamn kerosene behind the barn and instantly dismiss him as a serious person to speak to.
You know, one day, and we can't do it today, we're going to end this segment momentarily, but one day after some other things get taken care of, we need to talk more about him, because when we talked about him, we got feedback from a variety of people who hate this man. Like, we think he's a mook, and we can laugh about him, and he tried to rip us off, but he's a jerk off. But there are people who fucking hate him, and he's alleged by former investors to have ripped off them, the investors. Apparently him and Bo Dietl, the famed investigator, private detective.
Oh, good Lord, that private eye character with the fat jowls and the fucking stubble was always on news shows for years.
A New York legend. Well, apparently they have had a feud because he got ripped off. Apparently, this is the weirdest one. Apparently he got sued, Rob Ellen, by the widow of Brandon Tartikoff, TV legend, programming legend, because he rented her house and wouldn't pay. I mean, there's a whole bunch of stuff, a variety of lawsuits and depositions. Like, more people don't like this guy and are just waiting for anyone to talk about him. They just send all this shit out. But maybe in the future, but more things need to happen, and stay tuned for those happenings.
I need to hear more about the problems with Mrs. Tartikoff.
Lily Tartikoff.
Lily Tartikoff. Well, she certainly did.